Final Stop Brasil, Chapter 22, New Start in Hamburg, Sky Music Club. After I registered Kathy yet again in a new school, I began with my job. My remit was to take food orders for the next days by telephone. There were different choices of 4 menus using the appropriate color sticker on the aluminium packaging. These colors were also in accordance with the orders. I needed to get used to it initially. If someone ordered 10 times blue, red times 5, and so on. The orders by telephone I typed directly into the computer system to print the delivery notes and define the routes for the drivers. Until 2 o'clock in the afternoon, it was becoming pretty hectic. Afterwards, when everything was in the system, the shopping could be planned by the boss. Then it was a bit calmer, but also the accounting part had to be done very quickly. Creating invoices and reminders, receiving complaints of customers by telephone, creating credit notes, clearing with the customers why invoices were open and not paid for. For me, this was all new territory, for I had no professional experience. In the internship, I had been sent more than anything else on delivery trips with the company's car through the area. Manuela, whose position I would take, or not, was very patient while explaining everything to me. She was the same age as me, and we got along great. Everything was nice and okay so far, if it wouldn't have had a crux of the matter. Namely, my boss had employed yet another woman, who began her work the same day as me. Manuela didn't like her one bit, just the same as me. Our boss, however, wasn't sure if I would learn the complete job within 4 weeks, and wanted to make sure that everything went well after Manuela would leave us. I admired her for the way she kept calm and relaxed during the greatest hustle and could even joke. The 2 company heads wanted to decide in 3 or 4 months which one of us 2 newcomers finally would keep the job. Mrs. Beelight was determined to stay. This we realized from the very first day, and Manuela warned me, "Be careful with that woman. She walks across dead bodies to get this job." Thus I learned right from the start the meaning of the word mobbing. Every day I took 2 or 3 meals with me after work and stood with the car at least 1 hour in the traffic jam in front of the Elbe Tunnel, because I went from the north across to the other end in the south of Hamburg. On Fridays it easily increased up to 2 hours traffic jam, and when I finally came home, I sat with Kathy after dinner like a good girl in front of the television, or we played cards or any other board games. It was becoming a ritual that Bushy called us at least once a week. Then his mother would call me downstairs to the phone. Every weekend he visited his parents and played the role to be my boyfriend perfectly. Saturday noon he arrived, sat for a while with his parents, to come then and see us in the attic. Kathy and I were greeted alike with a kiss on the cheek. Then we went out together to McDonald's or to another cheap restaurant. We made day trips, and he showed us the area. At night, as if it was the most natural thing in the world, he shared the bed with me. After we talked for a while, he then would wish me a good night, sleep well, turned his back on me and fell asleep. Quite unlike me. I lay awake for hours and was frustrated and irritated. This couldn't be true. Me, who always had certain charm on most of the men and always got who I wanted, had fallen in love seriously with a man who had no interest at all in me, at least sexually. But I wasn't going to give up that easily. Perhaps he just needed a little time. But on the other hand, he was anything but shy. Bushy was more the playboy type, which he too had proved with his stormy kiss. That for him seemed to have no meaning at all. On Sundays, we all sat like a happy family to dinner with his parents. He lovingly patted my shoulder, and before he went back to Flensburg, He took me in his arms and kissed me furtively on the mouth in front of his parents. "Until next week, little one." So he drove off and left me with my emotional chaos alone. Weeks were passing this way, and I was getting more unhappy, in the job as in my private life, which I didn't even have any longer. One thing at least happened to me and took a 100-weight load from my heart. After more than 3 years, I was finally divorced from Dirk and didn't have to pay for any portion of the debt. Even the loan for the furniture I was spared, for he could hardly deny that he left me with nothing. I was infinitely happy to complete this chapter at last. After Manuela had definitely left the company, most curious things occurred. The accounting program crashed suddenly, documents disappeared, orders were reversed, drivers sent to wrong routes, but I was sure to have entered the data correctly. In a conversation with my boss I had asked for, I mentioned the suspicion that Mrs. Belight was sabotaging my work. He listened to what I said, but I had the impression as if he didn't believe me, even though he assured me to have an eye on Mrs. Belight. A few days later, he called her into his office for a talk. The result was that she crawled into his butt even more than before. "Yes, Mr. Keller, but please, Mr. Keller, I have brought you cake that you like so much," and so on. It was making me sick. The whole situation at my working place and in the house of Bushy's parents pulled more and more on my nerves. I was really furious with Bushy and so tired of pretending the good girlfriend of his. Almost every day I was looking for flats and stood in line for show dates. Not infrequently I could observe how the candidates opened their wallets and banknotes were discreetly pressed into the hands of the brokers. It was obvious that the broker made sure the candidate who paid most got the apartment. Resigned, I realized that I couldn't keep up in this competition. So much I missed Kiel, my little apartment, my friends. What did I have here? Nothing but troubles. On weekends, I refused to see Bushy more often. Should he sit alone with his parents or not, I didn't care. Instead, I went to Kiel. However, to go out with my friends at night wasn't possible, because I could hardly take Kathy back home and then return. One Friday evening, after I was already at the edge of my nerves, caused by Mrs. Belight, and 2 hours I spent being stuck in the traffic jam in front of the Elbe Tunnel, and when I arrived home, the announcement by his mother Bushy would come the next day, on Saturday, made me so fed up of everything that I fixed myself up late in the evening and drove aimless in the direction Hamburg. There I walked into a disco, which reminded me of the village discos in Kiel. Bored, I looked around me and was almost sorry to have come here. Some men were circling around, looking for someone to check up. Came past me, but they dared not to talk to me because they previously reaped devastating looks of me that they didn't try it in the first place. Whenever I used a car, I never drank alcohol, and so I ordered a mineral water at the bar, as someone behind me said, "You were never here before, right?" Irritated, I turned around and snapped, "Don't you have a better idea to pull on somebody?" But I actually looked into an interesting and attractive face. There it was again, the purely sexual interest. We didn't lose much time and drove to his apartment, where we had sex without any sentimental feelings. Later he exclaimed, "I never met a sensual woman like you before. You are absolutely top. We definitely must repeat it." "On the long run, this is going to be boring. Besides, I have a boyfriend," I lied and got dressed. His apartment was not too far from the house of the Bushmans. It was already after 8 o'clock in the morning, and he asked me to take him to the shop, almost opposite of the house of the Bushmans. I did him the favor, and when I stopped the car, he leaned over and kissed me. When getting out of the car, he asked without waiting for an answer, "Same place, same time next Friday?" Only now I parked the car properly in the parking lot, got out and entered the house, where Mrs. Bushman stood in the kitchen door, staring at me like an avenging angel. Nice shit. It suddenly became clear to me that she must have had stood at the window watching me. Sheepishly, I wished her a good morning and went quickly up the stairs. Exhausted, I dropped down on the bed and fell asleep immediately. I was awakened by the chummy shaking of Bushy. Then I remembered all my sins. Congratulations for the great number you performed. To be honest, I don't know how we get out of this one. Not coming home all night, I could have somehow been able to explain. But to be kissing with some guy in front of the house. Furious, I shouted at him now. Damn Bushy, since 2 months I'm playing the role of your good girlfriend, sitting around every evening alone. The weekends are no different. I have nothing but stress at work. I just needed someone, and you don't want me. But I'm here every weekend, he interjected, as if he'd not known what I was talking about. With my anger still rising, I made it more clear yet. Do you think you have a nun in front of you when you sleep here on the weekend and at night you turn your back on me? Nobody can stand this on the long term. Now I had hit the point. He understood, and I was dissolved in tears. Bushy said nothing to me, though, only comforting me by caressing my hair. Well, I'll go down now and tell them that we had a fight and that it was harmless with this guy. Don't know if my mother swallows it, but I don't have a better idea at the moment. Whether she believed it or not, she didn't forgive me and asked me to move out as soon as possible. So I searched desperately in all the different newspapers, not only in Hamburg, but also in those of the neighboring Lower Saxony. Actually, I found an offer for housing at 500 marks rent a month. I called there, and the man on the phone confirmed to my delight that it was still vacant. On the same day, I drove to the outside located village about 70 kilometers from Hamburg. I was really impressed as the owner of the house showed me the extension with separate entrance, a large sunny apartment with a fitted kitchen, a pretty tiled bathroom, and beautiful large windows. This was much more than I expected. In Hamburg, this apartment would have cost double. Thus I asked myself where the hook was hidden. But the apartment was vacant, and I took it. With the help of my friends from Kiel, the furniture was taken from the warehouse. I grabbed our personal things from the house of Bushy's parents, and very quickly we were in our new home. Of course, Kathy now had to change school again, but it was clear from the outset that we wouldn't remain forever with the Bushmans. Bushy helped me with the move, setting up our new home, and now spent, to my total surprise, almost every weekend with us. It was hard to believe, but everything was as usual. He laughed and joked with Kathy, took us on trips, we ate together, and he stayed overnight, in my bed as usual, without ever anything happening between us. But he was there for me whenever I needed him, even during the week. I only needed to call him, and he was there within an hour. When my old Opel decided to go on strike, Bushy came from Flensburg, drove me to work, saw to it that my car was repaired, and picked me up again from work. My landlord had absolutely no problem that my boyfriend stayed overnight with us. On the contrary, your boyfriend is a very nice guy. All the things that man is doing for you, this indeed must be true love. If he approaches for any little thing from Flensburg. This man had no idea how frustrated I was with Bushy and with my job. I finally decided to change both situations. Initially, I found a new job in a ship repair company in the free port of Hamburg. At least I was now working on the same side of Hamburg where I also lived, in the south, and could spare myself the miserable Elbe tunnel. The work was extensive, but very interesting with its international flair by the vessels which came from all countries and laid in the port for repairs. My immediate co-worker was an American who also possessed a German passport and was in the position of technical manager. With him, I worked closely together to create the invoices for the repairs. We got along great from the start. Since nobody else spoke English, I often interpreted business conversations. Frank taught me all the English terminology in marine technology, and so I was soon fit in generating repair reports, delivery notes, and invoices. I also made the entire financial accounting, payrolls, and oversaw the customs entries and exits. Because the operation was in the free port, all materials had to be declared specifically. When I began my work in the company, this field was pure chaos, and I started to build up its own accounting. The wife of the boss had a separate office space in the company and ran her own accounting firm. However, she was completely overloaded with her customers, so I also helped out here and decreased some of her customers. Among others, I did the accounts for a music composer and a small business for maritime items, and learned in half-legal ways to withhold some taxes from the German government. Within weeks, I had firmly organized the office. The work filled me out, and also my boss and his wife were very moody, and I didn't get along with the director's wife. Both were more than satisfied with me and never had any reason to complain. Thus, I felt much better with a solid job, a better salary of 3,000 marks in a cozy home. Even Kathy behaved almost civilized. Despite everything, I couldn't wean her to overcome her sloppiness, and if I gave her some small household tasks, such as emptying the dishwasher, hanging clothes to dry, were basically ignored by her and remained with me. The last days of 1989, we went to my old friend Susie and her family and celebrated in the friendly family circle our birthday and New Year. I still felt very lonely without my friends in the new environment, and it pulled me always back to Kiel. But from this New Year on, things would change abruptly. Bushy had stayed with me once again overnight on a Saturday, but my patience was at end. I loved this man and harbored deep feelings for him than just this deep friendship. I felt very hurt and doubted myself as a woman. When he once again turned his back on me after his obligatory "good night, sleep well," I jumped up and shouted at him, "How should I probably sleep well with you by my side, turning your back on me?" Bushy turned to face me and said quite calmly, "I know what you want, but I will not sleep with you." Angry and hurt, I went to the door of Kathy's room. "What are you doing?" he asked now, and I shouted at him, "I prefer to share the bed with Kathy than one more night with you. I can't continue like this." In the morning, I asked him not to visit us anymore. Seriously, I asked myself what was wrong with me. How could it be that Bushy was so cold? That he was not gay he had proved by a passionate kiss. My self-esteem was in the basement, and I did feel very hurt, and as a woman unattractive and worthless. But I didn't intend to keep up with this state. The following Saturday, I drove down to the center of Hamburg, heading for the Reeperbahn, and went looking for the disco I had been in with Jude, found it, and paid my admission at the cash counter, which was occupied by a very pretty black woman. The disco was still relatively empty, so I went back to this woman, and Franz, her name, was very pleased about a little entertainment. This was the beginning of a new friendship. I learned that she was a sister of the owner, and they came from Jamaica. I met her brother, the owner of the club, the general manager, Penny, a black American who also was an entertainer and extremely gay, and the DJ, JC, and over the next few weeks I somehow belonged to all of them. Admission I didn't have to pay anymore, and Franz invited me to their home. She was planning to spend her vacation in their home country, Jamaica, and tried to persuade me to come with her. I would have liked nothing more in the world, but I still possessed no right for leave. Neville, her brother, lived together with Anne, his life companion and mother of his son, and I was totally crazy over this little coffee-colored beautiful boy. I was always welcome in the house and got on well with Anne also. My nightmares were now less frequent, but they still came. In the TV program, I watched fascinated a series about an approximately 16-year-old half-breed boy with black and curly hair, tied at the neck, who played the lead role, and many times it shot through my head that could be my son. I didn't even really follow the story. I was only spellbound at this boy and how he acted to be happy together with his German adoptive mother. I even cried sometimes. I noticed that in Hamburg were a lot of mixed-blood children, and my biological clock began ticking. One Saturday night, I met Robert in another disco on the Reeperbahn. He was black, had dreadlocks, and was somehow a funny person. He was not ugly, but not necessarily good-looking. The same night, we went to his room and slept together. He didn't exactly pull me from the stool with his average sex, and I didn't even know why I stayed with him, but I wasn't in love with him, but I liked him. Robert told me he was English, which I believed. At that time, I was still very naive and didn't even become suspicious that he wasn't speaking the typical British accent. By then, I also knew nothing about Africans, nothing about their asylum problems in Germany. Neither knew I about the illegality of many Africans who stayed without a residence permit in Germany. I just saw that Robert pursued a regular job in a bakery. As long as Franz was on holidays, it was very chaotic in the sky. Neville sat at times at the entrance, then Anne, then Penny, and I asked Penny why they didn't have a substitute for Franz during the time she was on leave. Penny explained to me, rolling his eyes, "You don't know Neville. He doesn't trust no one in regards of money, not even me. Only his own people." I was very pleased, however, for the 3 cards I received from Jamaica, and Franz wrote every time on them, "Next time you are with me." Not long after her return, Franz confided to me that she intended to marry her German boyfriend in Heidelberg. Neville knows nothing about it. He'll freak out when he has no one left for the admission. But suddenly she came up with an idea. "Rita, you could replace me. Wouldn't you like to do the cash box?" I doubted that Neville would agree to it, but Franz was confident that he would trust me. Finally, I was her friend and went in and out of the house of the Beaumont family. "Wait, let's try it out next Saturday." She pretended having to go somewhere urgent, set me down on her place as cashier, pushed the keys for the cash box and the ticket roll in my hand and disappeared. Neville, by nature very impulsively, looked around the corner and couldn't believe his eyes. Then he growled, "Where is Franz?" I replied innocently, "She shortly had to go somewhere urgent." The short muted to 3 hours, in which Neville repeatedly asked whether she still wasn't back, and watched how I did the job. He seemed quite convinced, however, that I was competent enough to sell tickets, exchange money, and to check IDs to prevent minors from entering the club. In the end, he nodded happily to me, and I knew Franz and I had won. In my new second job, I found total fulfillment. That was my world, my music, and my people. I was drawn into the society of all the blacks and felt very happy since a very long time, even though I liked my white colleagues just as much. We were all like one big family. Franz strongly warned me before she left Hamburg. "Always remain sovereign and put yourself never in dispute with the guests. Never start anything with a male guest. Then you will always earn the respect of everybody." I stuck to her advice, did strictly my work, even if I sometimes danced to the music and sang along. The guests were a fascinating mix of Americans, Jamaicans, Africans, and Germans. The club had a nationwide reputation for the great music that was played. Neville jetted to the US or to England specially to buy new vinyl records or CDs. Even the array of live music and famous guests was impressive. I met George McRae, Ice Cube, Ice-T, and many others from the black music scene personally. And not only that, Carl Douglas, who reached worldwide fame with his hit Kung Fu Fighting, was after me like crazy, but after realizing that it was pointless, turned into a good friend of mine. A well-known talk show host on television stood one night in front of me and looked at me expectantly, obviously waiting that I dropped down before her feet. Unsteered, I returned her gaze and told her 15 marks for the admission, including a free drink. She made no move to pay, demanding instead the general manager. Still unmoved, I let Penny be called, who came down the stairs all excited and sneered at me. "Are you crazy? Don't you know who that is? This is Arabella Kiesbauer, a VIP. I replied, "Of course I know who that is, but it doesn't interest me. She has no VIP card, and therefore she's been charged like everyone else here." Her bodyguards paid the entrance, and for the next visit Penny issued her a VIP card. The job was never boring to me, plus I earned very good money. For 2 nights a week, Friday and Saturday, I had 300 cash on hand. Kathy and I were living now on a total income of 4,200 marks, plus child benefits that are now received for her. In 1990, this was far more than loads of family heads brought home. We lived well and lacked for nothing. I even bought myself a new car, a small sports car. My relationship with Robert was initially limited to 1 or 2 meetings a week. Sometimes he disappeared for a week or two, explaining that he was in England. I believed him, but had not much time to think about it. I took the whole affair not too seriously, because I was very busy with other things, and sometimes quite happy when he was on the road somewhere. At these times I was meeting with Alex, one of our bar girls, and a new friend of mine. Or I went to see JC at his house, because we had some very nice conversations. However, when Robert began to see me in the sky and came home with me afterwards, my problems began, the new old problems.